I'm not kidding. One time I logged in, nobody had been looking at it. Our bill was $80,000 because somebody had just spun up dozens of lab environments, right? They had created a bot that kind of bypassed some of our security controls on the application side. They had launched multiple different environments, and they had launched the biggest instances that they could find that were GPU based. And they had been running unobstructed because nobody looked at it and nobody had monitoring in place. $80,000. That's a full-time salary.
Welcome to part 2 of this amazing interview with Christopher, the founder of Cyber, an amazing online e-learning platform and community of cybersecurity learners and enthusiasts. Now in today's video, we're going to dive into what cybersecurity looks like in the cloud and how different it is from an on-prem environment. And of course, our holiday giveaway continues, and we're going to be giving away some epic prizes later in the video. So let's dive right on in. So the cloud is, I really think, becoming a big thing. Everyone says the cloud's the future, and I don't necessarily believe that everything's going to pivot to the cloud. I think we'll have these kind of hybrid environments, but also kind of introduces new security vulnerabilities as well. So what are some things that you guys are doing to kind of evolve around that?
Yeah, to me, there almost seems to be a lag in the cybersecurity space in terms of focusing on cloud. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of training material, including some of my own training material, that just focuses on specific types of attacks that are typically web-based or networking-based, Wi-Fi-based, things like that. But I'm not seeing very many training material that focuses specifically on cloud security. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of overlap, right? Like, of course, you're deploying a web application on the cloud, then web-based attacks are relevant to that environment in the cloud as well. But unless you actually understand how that cloud service provider works, whether it's AWS, Azure, or one of their specific services like EC2 or S3 or RDS, which is their database offering on the AWS side, unless you actually understand how that works behind the scenes, one, you can't properly secure it. And two, you can't properly offensively test it, right? If you're doing a cloud-based pen test and you don't actually understand how the cloud services work, you might catch some issues that you've learned from like web-based pen testing techniques, for example. But you're probably going to miss some other stuff that is specific to that cloud service. And so one of the areas
that's really scary to me. Oh, sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but
yeah.
That's really scary to me from being, in my perspective, not a security guy. With COVID, there was this massive push. We threw so much stuff into the cloud, and just kind of not knowing any of the proper techniques, the proper ways to secure things. Now COVID's kind of quieted down a little bit. A lot of these things are still up in the cloud, and just we don't know if they're secure, to be honest with you, because we don't know the different nuances for the different platforms. It's just kind of been this like hush thing, but it's only a matter of time before the bad guys start to realize this and start to leverage those vulnerabilities, the different nuances that comes from being in the cloud versus being on premise or so on. Yep. So yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Again, sorry to interrupt.
No, you brought up a good point, and it made me think of something else I can mention, which is I've been part of the problem myself. And what I mean by that is, I spent years training people on how to use the AWS cloud. But in my courses, because we weren't focused on security training, what I would do is I would go, okay, let's go ahead and provision this IAM user in the AWS cloud. And let's just set a password of password 123. Obviously, don't do this in production, right? This is not good security practice, but this is just an example. And most cloud training providers or courses that I look at, that's what they do. They're shifting the security training responsibility to someone else. But when you look at it, there is no someone else. There is nobody else that's picking up that slack and saying, here's how you secure your cloud environments. So what you end up with is a lot of cloud training that teaches you how to launch resources, but it doesn't teach you how to secure those resources. And again, there's a ton of great ethical hacking training. There's so much competition in that space, which is great because it gives people a lot of choice. But what I've been seeing the past couple of years of running cyber is that nobody's really focusing on cloud security specifically. And so going forward, that's really, I think, going to be a primary focus for cyber because one, that's what I have experience in. And again, two, it's just a need that I'm seeing. And more of our community members are coming up to me and saying, hey, I'm seeing these jobs are requiring cloud experience, or at least they it's a nice to have, right? It's not necessarily a requirement, but it might be a nice to have, or vice versa. Or they've gotten that job as a pen tester, and now they're getting an engagement that's cloud specific, and they're like, wait a minute, I don't really know anything about the cloud. So do you have any courses you'd recommend that would catch me up to speed on cloud security? And I can't recommend any, because I haven't found very many that are focusing on that specifically. So that's really going to be an area that I think is needed in the future to not only help you differentiate yourself for job applications today, but even 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10, 15 years from now. Like you said, the cloud is just so important. And even if you have hybrid environments, you still need to have those hybrid skills. And so many people are still focusing on non-cloud security skills that I think they can really differentiate themselves in the job market by picking up cloud security skills as well. I think it's absolutely critical.
It's kind of scary. I mean, it is scary to me that, it's just kind of like we've turned a blind eye to cloud security. It feels like, it's like, okay, let's just get up in the cloud and we'll worry about security later. And then that later never happened. Yeah. And it's like this vast void in this topic. There is just not out there. It's not talked about, but it's going to be one of those things that's going to really bite a lot of companies in the rear end, in the long run. So.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we're getting ready to launch our first cloud-based or cloud security-based course. It's called Introduction to AWS Security. And so we're launching that in December of 2022. So depending on when you're listening to this, the audience, it may either have just launched or it's probably already launched, and you can go check it out on cybrcyber.com. But it's really just kind of teaching the basics of each of the core services and components of AWS. But really beyond that, we then want to create some material that's going to be project-based. So if you launch these types of resources in the AWS cloud, here's how you secure them at each step of the deployment process. And then after that, here's how you can check the security of that, make sure that the settings are proper. And then here's how you can defend it by using either cloud native solutions or third-party solutions. Here's how you can do it on the blue team side. So that's really going to be a big area of focus for us in 2023 for sure.
Absolutely. And you know what, as soon as that course is out and available, we're going to make sure and put that down in the description for you guys.
Awesome.
Definitely go check it out. And, it's if you're interested in cybersecurity and you are interested in the cloud, this is definitely the way to go. You're going to really be ahead of the head of the game, I think, and really build those really important skills that a lot of employers are not even thinking about quite yet. It's definitely, I think it's going to be the future to come. Exactly.
And then you and I have talked about lab-based learning, right? Actually going in and doing what you're learning. The great thing about learning cloud security is that it's very hands-on and it's very practical. Of course, you always have theoretical things you can't necessarily apply in a real environment, but with cloud security specifically, especially the way that I plan on teaching it, it's very much, I need you to not just watch this video. I need you to go in your own account and actually follow step by step and do this yourself. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just going to forget everything that we just talked about. And second of all, we've also talked about how to bolster your resume and the tips to land a job. Once you're walking through those steps, take screenshots of that, write blog posts about it. Say, hey, today I learned how to secure my S3 data, or today I learned how to secure my VPC, how to set up an AWS firewall, how to configure that firewall. Like, talk about that and show actual screenshots of you doing it via the command line or in the AWS console, and post about it publicly. Absolutely.
Giveaway time, everyone. So in last week's video, we gave away 5 of Cyber's networking fundamental courses and 1-year access to the complete website. If you haven't already, go make sure and watch that video when you're done here to sign up for that giveaway. Now today we're going to be giving away 5 Security Plus practice exams and 3 Security Plus courses from Cyber. To enter, simply click the link in the description. And a big shout out to the team over at Cyber for making this possible. Now back to the video. Absolutely. And, one great thing about the cloud and the cloud cybersecurity is, to build these home labs and to practice these skills, a lot of times it doesn't cost anything. Almost all the major cloud platforms have a free tier where you can spin up instances and don't just, leave them on and running. Don't walk away and leave them spun up. But a lot of times, you can build these labs and test these different skills and ideas completely free of cost, and so many people I think forget that. And while you're doing that, you can be taking screenshots and building documentation, creating a blog post. That's going to go so far. If in the a potential employee came, and I'm doing an interview and I see they have all this documentation, that's going to be so valuable. To me, one, I'm going to know they're great at creating documentation, which is a very important skill to have, especially in cybersecurity. And two, I'm going to be able to validate what they're saying, that they actually know these skills, because look, I can see how they have done this already and they've documented it. I mean, that's huge to, a company that's looking to hire someone. So absolutely.
And that's a great point, because a main concern with learning the cloud is, I've heard the stories of people leaving EC2 instances running and then they owe hundreds or thousands of dollars. And that's a thing. I've forgotten to turn off resources. I've had those scary moments before. But number one, the cloud providers are aware of this. And as long as it's an honest mistake, you can usually reach out to them and they'll work with you on that, right? They're not just trying to rip you off. They want you to keep using their services. But number two, understanding your bill, honestly, is actually a critical part of security as well. And I think a lot of people miss that. Let me give you a great example of what I mean. When I was working at Linux Academy, we were a really, really small team at the time. We had hands-on labs, but these hands-on labs were deployed on your behalf. So it wasn't like, hey, pull up your own AWS account. It was click on this button, we'll launch an AWS account on your behalf, and then you can launch resources within that. And the reason for that is because we ate the cost on behalf of the customer. One of the issues with that is, this is years back. This is about 6 years back at this point. AWS was relatively new at that point in time. And so they were still launching a lot of features, and they have a service called IAM, or Identity and Access Management, which you can use to set up permissions. And so when we were launching these lab environments, we had to configure permissions for the lab environments. But AWS was missing some key IAM critical functionality that would make it to where we couldn't completely lock down some of those environments. And so we would oftentimes have people who would use our labs to launch Bitcoin mining resources. And they would go in and they would launch these massive servers that we could not prevent using IAM alone. And so I had to go in and I had to set up the right monitoring so that if we would exceed certain kinds of thresholds, or if a lab environment would meet a certain kind of metric, then I would know that I would need to investigate it. Because before we had that, I'm not kidding, one time I logged in, nobody had been looking at it. Our bill was $80,000 because somebody had just spun up dozens of lab environments, right? They had created a bot that kind of bypassed some of our security controls on the application side. They had launched multiple different environments, and they had launched the biggest instances that they could find that were GPU based. And they had been running unobstructed because nobody looked at it and nobody had monitoring in place. $80,000. That's a full-time salary.
That's crazy.
Yes. So
that's nuts.
Understanding your bill on a cloud service is absolutely part of security, and is an important thing that you have to learn that so many people just brush over.
That is a really great fact. And, I've never really thought about that too, because, my full-time job, I'm a director of network operation. We do utilize the cloud, and, that's one of my things I do every month when the bill comes in. I'm looking over it and I'm like, oh, okay, why did it go up this month versus this month? And, I look for those little nuances, and that can be a really great indicator that something's not right. All of a sudden, if your bill's normally, $80 a month, and all of a sudden it's $300, okay, what's using those extra resources? Who's got it in there? Who's had access? That can be a major red flag right there. And a lot of times people don't think about it. If I just went through and rubber stamped the bill every time and the accounting department never said anything, someone could have had, compromised that system for months and just be sitting there, doing whatever, you know what I mean? So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. Honestly, this is an exciting time to be in this field. Every year, it just feels like so much cool stuff is happening. More tools are coming out, more people are joining the industry. And I think it's an exciting time to join it. And it's an exciting time to learn more about IT and cybersecurity in general. But again, and this is a tip that we talked about previously, which is just don't let it overwhelm you, and try to find mentors that can help you guide through what to focus on based on what you're interested in, so that you don't get overwhelmed by the amount of information that's coming at you and amount of things that you need to learn. But just remember this. Remember that people spend their entire lives in this industry, like 20 plus years of experience, and they are still not experts in every single topic. No one is going to be an expert in every single topic, and you don't have to be. You just need to figure out what you enjoy the most about this industry, focus on learning that, and then everything else is just going to kind of fall into place. So for me, like I've said before, networking's never been my interest, but I've learned important networking concepts through my learning journey of being a web developer, a cloud architect, and things like that. Like, I enjoyed those aspects of it, and they led me to learning networking security, for example. So just focus on what you're passionate about, focus on what you love doing, and don't necessarily just blindly listen to people that say, nope, drop everything you're doing and learn this instead. Just, be smart about that. Don't burn out and don't get overwhelmed. And just try to find mentors in the industry, try to join friendly communities, and I think you'll go a really long way, and hopefully you'll have a great time doing it.
And if there's anyone out there that wants to connect with you, what's the best way people to get a hold of you?
I'm on social media, so you can find me Christoph Limpelaer on LinkedIn. You can find me at Christoph Limp. I think it's Limp, yeah, LIMP on Twitter. You can find me on cybr.com or cyber.com. There's a contact form there. You can also find the Discord community by going to cyber.com/Discord. I'm there every single day of the week. So you could join there and DM me if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that. I'm more than happy to help in any way that I can.
Absolutely. And, we'll make sure and put links to that down in the description. I can't stress how amazing it is, this community of people that you have built, where it's really, truly a safe community for those who have those entry-level questions. And I've been a victim of it myself, where I go and ask this question. They're like, well, why don't you know this? I'm like, well, because I don't know everything. Like you said earlier, if you don't know how to do this, why are you even using Kali Linux? You shouldn't be using Kali Linux. And, like you said, depending on the question, that could be the case, but more than not, it's not. I like to learn by just trying and making mistakes, starting messy. That's how I learned Linux, is like, well, you know what? I really need to learn Linux. So I'm going to start daily driving Linux, and I'm going to just kind of learn on the fly. And okay, why is my sound not working? Or, okay, why can I not connect to the internet? Okay, I got to get into the terminal and reconfigure, my net plan or whatever it is. I think that's one of the great ways to learn. That's how I learn. I just learn by doing. So I think it's great that you've built this community to really nurture that kind of style of learning, and you have so many great resources and courses coming out. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Oh,
of course. I was going to say a comment to what you just said. You always have that one person when I go to conferences or meetups or something like that, they'll come up to me and they won't even necessarily introduce themselves. They'll just come up to me and they'll ask me this extremely obscure and technical question to like kind of like quiz me and see if I really know what I'm doing or not. I'm like, I don't know, dude. Give me 20 minutes to Google it. I could probably figure it out, but I don't know. I've never seen that exact scenario before. Like what so don't,
I've had that so many times too. And it's ridiculous. I think, anyone who says, you need to know all this stuff off the top of your head in IT to be successful is lying.
Absolutely.
I can almost guarantee you I am on Google at least every other day, learning different things and doing my own research. You're not expected to know everything in IT, because you never will. At the rate new information and new things are coming out, you'll never learn everything. You'll never be truly a product expert. But, if you have the desire to constantly be learning, you're going to do a really great job.
Well, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to be here and to talk to your audience. And I hope they find value in what we just talked about. I certainly had a great time talking about it with you on your show here. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. And anytime that you have a community that's trying to help other people out by running giveaways, giving content away for free and just helping educate and helping guide, it's always something that I admire, because that's helped me so much in my own career. It's honestly changed my life. I would not be here today if we didn't have people like yourself creating this type of content and helping people out. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you for letting me be part of it. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. I also really appreciate you spending time with us today.
Absolutely, and thank you again for taking the time. And yeah, that's what we're all about. You know, we're not in this for the money or the fame. It was someone similar to me that's no longer really doing this that really convinced me to get my start in the IT field, and I want to be that for someone else. Now, if you're like me and all pumped up to continue to learn on how to break into the cybersecurity field with no experience, I suggest you check out this video on the screen now, where I cover all the tips and information you need to know about building a career in the cybersecurity field. So if you want to ditch that boring job and start an exciting career in cybersecurity, make sure and check out this next video. Thank you guys for tuning in, and until next time, keep learning.